I've just got the thumbs up. Good afternoon, Lindsay from Freedom Media, WA, and we are here in the gardens of West Australian Parliament. Of course, standing next to me is the Honourable Ben Dawkins, who has just participated in his debate. We did come down earlier to cover that, but we've actually sat in the public gallery throughout the debate. Ben, I guess initially a tough gig, 20 minutes to get these issues through. How do you feel overall?
I feel a little bit disappointed just in myself, obviously all the stories that I've had, and being able to get that across is not as easy as I thought it might be. And yes, I apologise to those people if I wasn't able to get their story in, or if I wasn't really able to get the essence of what they were saying or what they wanted from this. And also disappointed just because the performance of, say, for example, the Liberal Party, Steve Thomas, they're deliberately not getting the point. I mean, in the end, my point, we all agreed on damage from vaccines, injuries. Everyone agreed on that. And there are documents on all government websites about that. And so that issue is going to unfold further, I think, through the courts and through the compensation schemes. But my specific point was about being sacked for not taking a vaccine, and how that is an unacceptable infringement of a person's individual liberties, or being forced to get the vaccine, which they didn't want to take, with a threat of being sacked. Either one. That's where it's unacceptable, and this is what the Liberals and obviously the government just wouldn't accept. They say it's okay to sack people because everything turned out all right in the end. That's not true. Those people's lives are individually affected forever now, their careers, and those who took it, who didn't want to take it, their health potentially if they had an adverse event.
Yep.
And for Steve Thomas to say, oh well, everyone has to take the risk of an adverse event for the greater good. That's not how individual or medical ethics work. I mean, everyone has their own risk profile, and so you decide if you want to take that risk of an adverse event. And people weren't given the choice and were sacked if they didn't do it. So I just think it's an outrageous misunderstanding on behalf of all of those people in there. And what I will say to you at home is, if you think you're smarter than people in Parliament, that's because you are. Because they're absolutely low level of representation. So everybody just it's a good job, just get involved in politics, and so that we have an alternative, or nominate yourself, because this place is a joke.
And I think, I'm going to pick up, excuse my flicking through here, the couple of notes and that I made. As you touched, Sue Ellery did say, she was very clear with this, that the rights of those that wanted to protect themselves against COVID should be put above the rights of those that didn't. And she said that. Steve Dawson from the Liberal Party also said that. And
you're having trouble with your names today. So it was Kate Dowse from the Labor Party and Steve Thomas from the Liberal Party.
Thank you. Yep, thank you. We couldn't see those speakers.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so we couldn't see them. So that's why. I guess I could see. Yep. And then, but coming back to what you said, one of the comments, why in God's name did we sack people for maintaining body autonomy? That point alone was very clearly missed from the Labor Party and also Liberal.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of my biggest disappointments, was deliberately overlooking. So how do you sort of advance an argument in a chamber where there's no actual responsibility to listen or respond meaningfully? Because you can make the same point and all they do is deflect onto, well, isn't it great that we had, a positive outcome overall? That's not the point. The point was whose rights were trampled on in the meanwhile,
yeah, whose
health has been affected in the meanwhile through coercion, and whose careers have been destroyed. Those are the points. And their arguments are totally flawed, because there is an alternative to sacking someone. In this day and age, we can redeploy people at home under some form of JobKeeper, or just pay them to work from home. Cops or nurses can do stuff, like I say, they can develop.
You mentioned training manuals.
Yep. Develop training manuals, whatever. I mean, until the threat has passed. Where this government thinks that it's acceptable to sack people because they're refusing a vaccine for their own, what I say are valid reasons, that's what this has really come down to, is how arrogant this Parliament is about those individual people, and it's just a complete lack of empathy.
And you mentioned, well, again, the Liberal Party. Would you challenge the comment that was made by the Deputy Leader of Committees for the Liberal Party in talking about, he said that those that were immunocompromised had opportunity to go out and get exemptions. And those that had opportunity not to get the vaccines, I should say, also had the opportunity to not be involved in the mandates. I mean, that was...
Well, the second part, I'm not so sure about the rights of immunocompromised people, but certainly the second part, yeah. I mean, it's not... See, there's a fine line between choice and coercion in this case, because if like Julie, who I spoke on behalf of has a specialised career, 23 years doing that particular thing, that job opportunity doesn't exist for her anymore because someone else has taken it after she was removed from that position due to refusing the mandate. So, funnily enough, I mean, surprise, surprise, it's about individuals. You've got to look at the individual cases. To gloss over them and just point to the overall outcomes in this state is just a manifest failure to appreciate what individual freedoms are all about. And I just don't think the Liberal Party's in any position, given that they're supposed to care about those things, they're in any position to recover from where they are, which is in the toilet at the moment with the number of members they have at the moment. They're not going to recover if their leaders don't even understand what's supposed to be liberal ideology. I mean, that's why I say this place is a joke, because even the people you expect to support things like this don't, because they're just not good at their jobs. They don't actually understand what they're supposed to understand.
Well, and you mentioned that some of the people in the place are a bit of a joke and not good at their jokes. From where we were seated, we were able to have a very clear view of Kyle McGill, who represents mining and pastoral, a very, very large electorate, important electorate. Now, you would expect, whilst he didn't participate in your debate, and he had nothing to say in relation to that he would use on the public purse his time constructively and perhaps answer some parliamentary emails, emails from his constituents. But he sat there, and would it surprise you to know that he looked at Facebook and TikTok videos on how to season chicken nuggets coming out of an air fryer, on the ultimate cage fighting. He is rather partial to watching videos there. How to make a custom-made lacquered chessboard. I sat and watched for nearly 4 minutes while he watched that video, and also unboxing Superman suits from TikTok and doing immediate transportations. I mean, that is the calibre of the person of Kyle McGill, who's sitting there whilst you're on your feet, whilst Wilson Tucker's on his feet, whilst Dr. Brian Walker's on the feet. In fact, even his own party, who did say that they agree that this has caused harm, and that's how he used his time. Would that surprise you? No.
The prosecution rests. I mean, this is what I was saying before. It's not that crash hot in here, guys. So nominate for Parliament, set up a political party, do something.
At least there was a crack there. I guess, a comment Wilson Tucker came out and said that better outcomes are achieved when the government takes ownership over bad decisions. And there were some bad decisions which you were looking to highlight there. And that we do need to talk about these. The Emergency Services Minister, Steve Dawson, did say that he welcomes this debate, but then he shut the debate down in the same breath. I mean, I was gobsmacked.
Yeah, look, I mean, I did my best. I apologise to those who, may not have got what they hoped. But at the end of the day, what we've done is really consolidate the fact that all the evidence is coming around now to showing that, pericarditis, myocarditis, these things did happen. I was encouraged to see that there's some talk and support for the federal compensation scheme, but this needs to be amped up now, and also the review of things like I say, never again should nurses and police, for example, lose their jobs simply for wanting to maintain their own bodily autonomy. So that was my main, and that comes to employment law. We need to change the employment law so that they can't say choosing not to have a vaccine because of your own individual circumstance is a failure to abide by a lawful and reasonable order, which is what it is in employment law. And that's the argument that the police commissioner and others have been running for sacking perfectly good policemen. So, it's like that point didn't get anywhere, and that's a positive point because I'm talking about improving it for next time.
Yeah.
Improving it for our kids so that we don't operate in this authoritarian way, and people's right to be employed in their profession, which they know and are needed to do for our, like in the case of police, for the safety of the society, that they're still allowed to make those choices, not to get a vaccine and retain their job. I mean, it just seems so obvious, but we need to change the laws on that.
And I think it's been I'm sure, quite a hectic morning for you prepping for that, so I won't keep you much longer. I do just want to touch, you mentioned the immunisation or the Commonwealth compensation scheme. You pointed out that you couldn't ask a question of the representative of the Minister of Health because there was no representative there, but you did ask the question, is the government, or what level of support is the West Australian government seeking from the Commonwealth for this, which is telling in itself. If they are seeking further support from the Commonwealth for vaccinated compensation, then that means they know there's a problem. Would you agree with that?
Yes, they know there's a problem, and it's just failure to recognise it in explicit terms in the Parliament, which is my disappointment that people think that by not elevating these issues in Parliament, they think they're doing a good job for their party or for Mr McGowan or Mr Cook. But really, it's just showing that they have a very shallow understanding of and a lack of empathy for the people out in the community. I mean, I thought last time I checked, I thought we were supposed to speak on behalf of people that contact us. But they seem to think that they're doing their jobs by not raising any individual circumstances and not raising any, sad stories and tragic stories. I fundamentally question the value of this entire system that we have of so-called democracy.
Yeah, and I'm sure, as would many people. I guess on that note again, I can say as an observation, you've offered your apology. From what I can tell you that your what would you call it, your allocated seat there, it was absolutely covered with just reams and reams of information, and I was watching you just in awe, I guess, of trying to piece all that together to get some of those stories, because you've been inundated with that. And yet I looked down directly again, Kyle McGill, and watching these cage fightings, so much so that he had to go and borrow Pierre Yang's charger to keep his phone going. But then I looked down and all he had is one piece of paper, and it's it really is a sad. I mean, that if that's the most important thing that he can do in his day, I guess from my observations, and I'm sure many that would get an understanding of what I've just said, then would be absolutely appreciative of you generating and tabling this motion, Ben.
I'll try my best. I mean, all you can do at the end of the day with situations like with Kyle McGinn is have a good laugh. He's got the big mullet, he's rocking with the mullet from Kalgoorlie and all that stuff, and he does provide a few laughs with his interjections. So at the end of the day, you try and enjoy what you're doing. I mean, there's maybe issues like you've highlighted, but what can you do at the end of the day but laugh?
That's and just point out the observations that we've seen. That's how we use his time. Yeah. Ben, thank you very much. We've just caught you coming out on the back of that and just doing a quick live stream so that we can update people. We will look at perhaps trying to... Yeah,
sorry, one thing. What did you think of him, of Steve Thomas turning it around and saying he was basically accusing me of political expediency because I've decided to look at the evidence and talk about people who've raised problems with the vaccine and the mandates, etc. And he turned around and accused me of just fishing for re-election, like co-opting a cause, not because I believe in it, just because I want to get votes. What do you think of that? I thought that was like it's kind of perverse in a way. It just shows how much he seems to despise MPs who actually do talk for people out there. And do, I mean, I thought that was our job, and then he's criticising me for it.
Yeah, and I would certainly say that as well, because you said a number of times that my office, my electorate, my constituents have been contacting this, this place, contacting me over these issues. I wasn't in this place at the outset of Parliament, but I've been in here for 6 months, and these are what people are contacting me about. Yeah. So you made that very clear.
So why am I criticised for that? And he's trying to demonise that, what does he call it, 3% of people who have this issue. Like, is that 3% less important than any other 3% of the? I mean, this is anyway. That's just my personal take on what happened today.
Look, I also think there was a heated debate there between yourself and Sue Ellery. Kate Dowse was it again? Sounds like Sue Ellery. I couldn't see her, but Kate Dowse, and just to actually ask for some empathy. Yeah. And what I got from that, from her response, is there is absolutely no empathy whatsoever. And for her to highlight that you had a smirk on your face, which just sat through it. I can see that, it is a bit of a circus if you haven't seen it or watched it, but to hear and see it in person, your smirk is not one of, of trying to make a comical issue. It's one, there is no empathy. And where do you go from that to try and highlight? So I guess well done for that particular, exchange, I guess.
The Labor Party tends to do this virtue signalling where they're the saviour of every minority group you can think of. But when it comes down to a real issue, like a real adverse reaction or vaccine injury, no empathy, because they've decided that's politically not important for them. But if they want to co-opt another cause for some other minority group, they'll make out that they're the next coming of Christ in terms of how good they are at supporting that group, but not this group.
Yep, and again, I could come back to Kyle McGill talking about the Kalgoorlie Cup race, and they weren't able to build their chair stack, which they normally have in Parliament. That's again, he's speaking out for people because they banned plastic cups at the Kalgoorlie race, and people have been contacting him. He stood on his feet for 20 minutes talking about that. Yeah. So it was an interesting, I guess, experience. We were always going to cover it one way or another. We'll try to bring bits and pieces, from this perhaps tomorrow. But for the update there, I guess the next year as things develop, then we'll actually see the position of the Liberal Party, exactly how much of the ground of those that are conservative in their views will need to, well, I mean, people are disenfranchised with all of politics, which is the very point you're saying now. But perhaps after some of the things that they've heard him say today, could be even more disenfranchised with the WA Liberal Party.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I'll leave it there with the Liberals. I don't know whether Basil will help them. I mean, they need a more sophisticated way of thinking, when it comes to individual freedoms and these ethical issues. They don't seem to understand ethics properly. Nick Garand does, but he wasn't in the chamber. He was paired out, which might be an interesting line of inquiry for you. Why was it that he was chosen as the pair when he's actually close to an expert or legal expert on these things? So that was interesting. Was he sidelined in any way, perhaps? But it's not as sophisticated as even in the federal Senate. As you've seen from some of the inquiries in there, very base level of understanding of ethics and medical ethics and things like that here. And I don't know whether Basil Zemplis is going to solve that for the Liberal Party.
That's probably for another stream. I want to come back to when you say paired out, just to explain those at home. So that's to balance the numbers on both sides. And I guess somebody, because there was more on the crossbench and opposition, as opposed to Labor in Parliament or in the Legislative Council for that day. And so I guess you're not suggesting that, but it is interesting why he was paired out when the Honourable Nick Goren has been quite vocal about speaking to that, and from the legal viewpoint, he certainly would have added some significant clout behind that, because he's been in Parliament for this whole process. When Sue O'Leary talked about all members of Parliament came together, they sat through the school holidays, passed 7 COVID bills for the benefit of the West Australian people. They've never done that before.
That might have been when I was smirking, was it? When they started just lauding themselves for their performance.
Yeah. So, on that note, then just a quick live stream update to those that have commented. I'm guessing everything's...
Good luck, keep trying.
Thank you.
Yep, so plenty of comments on that viewpoint, I guess, Clayton, just to...
Yeah, there's a lot of people, some normal comments, but a lot of them are quite good. Like, some of them are in favour, just saying, keep trying, keep pushing through, and stuff like that, with our common comments from Dennis and Glenn, which is quite good. So the normal comments coming through, which is fine. Rex has made there of getting rid of the state and federal governments altogether. We have one from Marita. Marita, she said she lost her 34-year nursing career and she's suffering from myocarditis as well. So, and refused to have any more of the vaccine. So we have another adverse.
I'll do a member statement on that, sorry. In 2 weeks' time I'll do a member statement, because that's when I can talk about anything. So was it Maria? We should talk about that. I mean, because those are the... Yeah.
So contact Ben Dawkins' office. I'm sure the email's out there. You won't see what just happened on mainstream media. This is the beauty of live streaming. It's unscripted. Ben's given his time, and it's fantastic that those at home are commenting in real time, which Clayton behind the camera has just read out. So I'm sure we always appreciate your comments, and Ben, just a few of the comments that you can know that your efforts and results have certainly not gone unnoticed, and it's probably there's more people listening and watching than perhaps some people in that place have just failed to recognise.
Yeah, thank you. I'll leave it there. I should say I am triple vaxxed, so I'm not in any way... I think there is a place for vaccines, just not forcing or mandating them. And that should have been obvious, I would have thought. But and also, getting back to the last one, I do think I should apologise to people that my daughter and I did call campaigning for Labor about vote for Mark McGowan and he'll keep you safe during the pandemic, because I had a thought about that, and I said that was me, and it was me who did that, and that was another life when I guess I was part of the party regime. But I apologise to people for doing that, because that was a way of sort of what would you say, improper persuasion, I suppose, to vote for McGowan, which I now regret having done.
Well, I guess it comes back to what Wilson Tucker says: better outcomes achieved when we actually acknowledge bad decisions.
Yeah.
So, your better outcome is you've acknowledged it and you've offered that apology, and onwards and upwards. I think it's clear that your vaccination status is irrelevant. Kate Dowse, if it was her that stood up and said, talked about her vaccine status, it was never about that. It was about, as you say, people's inalienable rights and
inalienable. Yeah. I like that word, and it's a legal word. And what I also said about the mandates or people getting sacked for not taking the vaccine was that the employer shouldn't be, they're not able, in my view, to delegate the responsibility to treat that person fairly, that employee, to something that the Chief Health Officer said, because there were other options of that person, like I say, being put onto some form of JobKeeper, that type of thing. Well, who cares even if they weren't working productive from home, then at least they wouldn't lose their whole career and can come back once the danger is over.
And you did make that point, and that's a good point. Thank you for refreshing my memory there, because that jumped out at me when you were saying that what we saw in this state is we saw employers that they discharged all of the rights that employees had within the workplace based on advice from a Chief Health Officer.
Yeah, when, it was like, oh, look what he made me do. He made me sack this person. No, there were options within that Chief Health Officer advice to deal differently with different employees. The Chief Health Officer didn't tell you to sack him. That was just some advice about, encouraging the vaccine effectively. But yeah, it's a very dumbed down approach to say, oh well, I had to sack him because of that. It's not. People could have been dealt with differently, respectful of their decision not to be vaccinated.
Which is what you were talking about the whole time. So I think on that note, I'm getting eaten by mosquitoes here. They're coming out of the bushes. Ben Dawkins, thank you very much for your time, and those that have commented as well. So just a quick update. So for myself, Lindsay from Freedom Media WA, Clayton behind the camera, and Ben Dawkins, well, yeah, good afternoon.
Goodbye.